Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Julia Middleton and I work with the Rural Health Initiative, which is housed at the Montana Office of Rural Health and the Area Health Education Center, otherwise known as AHEC. The mission of the RHI is to encourage partners to share ideas and expertise and to support communities in improving health while stimulating a higher level of wellness across the state. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for our webinar, Student Success Starts with Safe Routes to School, which is presented by Taylor Lonsdale, the Montana Safe Routes to School Coordinator, and Cathy Costakis, the Active Living Coordinator for the Montana Nutrition and Physical Activity Program, also known as NAPA. Taylor has 18 years of engineering design experience covering numerous specific disciplines. He was a founding member of the Bozeman Area Safe Routes to School Task Force and is a founding board member of the Bozeman Bike Kitchen. As the Montana Safe Routes to School Coordinator, Taylor works with communities across Montana in developing and implementing Safe Routes to School programs. He is responsible for helping communities to gather a Safe Routes to School task force or committee, identifying barriers to biking and walking, supporting the community in developing a funding application, and then supporting the community in implementing the non-infrastructure portion of the program. Cathy Costakis is the Active Living Coordinator for Montana NAPA, which is a statewide obesity prevention program funded through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's located at the Montana Department of Health and Human Services in Helena and Montana State University in Bozeman. Cathy is responsible for building partnerships statewide to implement evidence-based strategies that address environmental and policy approaches to promoting and supporting physical activity. Cathy also works to implement a statewide Communities Putting Prevention to Work initiative focused on complete streets. She currently serves as the president of the board of directors of the National Society of Physical Activity Practitioners in Public Health and served 2 years on the Bozeman Planning Board. The webinar today will present a brief and basic overview of the Safe Routes to School program and then focus on successes from communities across Montana. The webinar will conclude with ideas for next steps for Safe Routes to School programs, including discussions of other advocacy efforts the Safe Routes to School group might consider, such as local policies regarding complete streets and school siting. Before our featured speakers begin, we would like to take a few moments to join the National Office of State Offices of Rural Health, NOSOR, and other state and national rural stakeholders in celebrating the first ever National Rural Health Day, which is today, Thursday, November 17th. Governor Schweitzer expressed his support by proclaiming today National Rural Health Day in Montana. NOSOR created National Rural Health Day as a way to showcase rural America, to increase awareness of rural health-related issues, to promote the efforts of NOSOR, state offices of rural health, such as the one in Montana, and others in addressing those issues. Plans call for a National Rural Health Day to become an annual celebration on the third Thursday of each November. The Rural Health Initiative supports rural citizens by maintaining a website which features health and wellness programs and events happening throughout Montana, providing educational webinars, and strengthening local efforts through mini-grants specifically designed for healthy initiatives in rural communities. We have a few special guests on the phone today that are joining us in celebrating National Rural Health Day and are here to show their support for rural health. Senator Jon Tester, Will Self, who is a representative from Congressman Denny Rehberg's office, and Kaylin Dorhauer will be reading a letter of support from Senator Baucus. We want to thank you all for being here and appreciate your support. Just a reminder, before you speak, please press *6 to unmute your line. Again, that's *6. And Senator Tester, would you like to go ahead and start?
Okay, you out there?
Yes, we are. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on the call today, and thank you all participants for being on the call today. Student success starts with safe roads to school. It's an incredibly important topic for National Health Day, especially in a state like Montana that is all rural. The challenges of getting to school safely in rural America are far different from challenges that our students have in the bigger cities, in the urban areas. So your conversation today to find ways to fully developed. So I just want to thank you all for strengthening rural America through this conversation. There's been a lot of bills that have come out that I have supported, and I do actually, I support the Safe Routes to Schools program. It is very, very important, and it's another piece of the puzzle to develop the next generation and make them into all they can be. So thank you very much for the time, and look forward to visiting with you about this, especially once you get done with some suggestions.
Thanks, Senator Tester. We certainly appreciate you being here today. Will, from Congressman Rieberg's office, I believe you have a few words to say from Congressman Rieberg. Just a reminder, *6 to unmute your line.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can.
I'm pleased to extend my greetings on National Rural Health Day in Montana. National Rural Health Day serves as a reminder that access to care is critical for all Montanans, regardless of where they live. Whether you live in Billings, Braddock, Missoula, or Medicine Lake, healthcare impacts every one of us, and your hard work is instrumental in bringing healthcare to all corners of our state. I commend you for your dedication to serving others and for all your hard work you do for Montana. Know that your efforts are appreciated by the many people you serve and by everyone who cares about building a better future. I look forward to continuing our work together on these important issues. Please don't hesitate to contact my office if I can ever be of assistance. Sincerely, Denny Rieberg, Montana's Congressman.
Thanks, Will, for reading that, and please extend our thanks to Congressman Rieberg as well. Now we'll hear from Kaylin Dorhauer, who will be reading a letter that was sent by Max Bacchus.
Hi, this is Kaylin, and Max Bacchus says, Dear friends, I'm proud to support the work of Montana's Rural Health Initiative and joining you in highlighting National Rural Health Day in Montana. Thank you for your commitment to this critical topic for Montana families. Like you, I am committed to improving healthcare in a responsible and cost-effective way. In the last 8 years, healthcare premiums have risen 8 times faster than wages. As you all well know, Montana families cannot keep up with these skyrocketing healthcare costs. That's why we fought to deliver meaningful health reform in a balanced way to lower costs and improve quality while promoting wellness and modernization to our healthcare system. Health reform recognizes the importance of prevention by working to change the system to become more focused on keeping people healthy, not just treating them when they get sick. The law will also help our doctors spend more time doing what they do best, caring for patients. The new reforms will allow doctors to spend less time filling out paperwork and more time treating patients. I'm proud to see Affordable Care Act grants going to help Montanans, especially when it comes to expanding residency programs to attract new doctors to rural areas. Montana has the fewest per capita physician residency positions in the country. The Affordable Care Act is starting to change that. I'm very proud that our residency programs are expanding. This will allow more of Montana's brightest to train right here at home and eventually bolster the number of doctors serving our communities. I also pledge to you that I will continue to fight to protect rural health care in Washington. I will make sure Montana's rural critical access hospitals continue to have the tools and support they need to provide life-saving care to folks who live long distances from larger hospitals. Thank you for all you do for Montana. I look forward to continue to work together to improve rural health care and health care for all Montanans. All the best, Senator Max Bacchus.
All right, thank you, Kaylin, and we'll extend a thank you to Max Bacchus as well. And thank you all for joining us today to celebrate National Rural Health Day and, most importantly, to learn about the Safe Routes to School programs. Just a few technical details before Taylor and Cathy begin. All lines have been set to mute. You may unmute your line by pressing *6. Again, that's *6 to unmute. And throughout the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box in the sidebar to the right of your screen. At the end of the presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Without any further ado, Taylor and Cathy, are you there?
We're here.
All right, excellent.
Everybody hear me all right? Hope so. Anyway, and see my screen? Julie, are you still there? Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, I just made you presenter. It should be showing up soon.
Okay, great.
Your slides look great, Taylor. We can see them now.
Super. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. As Julia said, I'm Taylor Lonsdale, and I'm the Safe Routes to School Coordinator for Montana. And I want to talk today about the Safe Routes to School program. I'm going to start with a quick overview of what Safe Routes to School is, what the program entails, and then jump into some success stories, and then talk about what are next steps for communities that already have programs running. Okay, my first question for you is, would you rather start your day like this or like this? And that's what Safe Routes to School is really about. It's about changing the way that we start our days. It's about changing the way our students start their days. Instead of spending the morning rushing around, driving to school, we want to spend the days interacting with our kids, getting some exercise, and getting them prepared for a full day at school. Safe Routes to School is a 100% federally funded transportation program that works to make it safe and convenient for K through 8 students to walk and bike to school. Successful programs increase physical activity and help to establish lifetime habits. The program was envisioned as a health program. It's an opportunity to work to get our kids more physically active. As we heard our congressional representation talking about problems with obesity, childhood diabetes that we're all working with every day, Safe Routes to School is one tool in the toolbox to getting kids more physical activity that they need. In addition, we're talking about teaching safety skills, lifelong safety skills to students who will be bicyclists and pedestrians long into the future. We have the opportunity to improve safety around the schools, both physical safety from traffic as well as personal safety. And we can improve air quality. The EPA has a number of studies out regarding schools where they have an increase in students walking and biking to school. They see a significant increase in air quality. We have fewer motor vehicles idling around the schools. We have better air quality. And most importantly, Safe Routes to School program is a long-term investment in our community. We work to build sidewalks and build the possibility for people, not just students, to be active in our community. And we build a sense of community built around the health and safety of our students. The Safe Routes to School program involves what we call the 5 E's: education, encouragement, enforcement, evaluation, and engineering. It's really important that we look at this program from a holistic standpoint. All of our communities across Montana, we all have our infrastructure or engineering challenges. We all have sections of sidewalk that are missing, roads that are unpaved, sidewalk that doesn't exist, and that's an important part of the program. I'd like to talk a lot today about the other 4 E's, the non-infrastructure programs, and that's education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation. So we'll start with education. Education portion includes students, teachers, parents, and community. Again, we're taking a holistic look at the entire community and having an understanding not just of the pedestrian and bicyclist safety skills that we need, but also a community awareness about why it's important for our students to walk and bike to school, why it's important for us to build our community in such a way that we can all engage in active transportation and more active lifestyles. On the encouragement side of the program, this is where we get to have fun with the kids. We make it fun to walk and bike to school. We host events. Walk to School Day is the first Wednesday in October. Schools across Montana, this year we had over 45 schools participating in an international walk to, registered and participating in International Walk to School Day. There were probably more that didn't register. In the spring, many schools and communities host a Bike to School Day event around May as National Bike Month. We can set up competitions, see which classes can walk across the state of Montana first, or around the state of Montana, or across the United States. This can tie in also with mileage clubs. Students earn incentives, earn prizes, earn recognition as they rack up mileage walking to and from school. Mileage clubs play an important role in that we can include students Lonsdale, Montana, to walk entirely from home to school, walk or bike, and make some part of the journey at least in a motor vehicle. So we can include them by allowing them to walk at recess, at lunchtime, during their PE class, during their mileages. And the last one that's on the screen is a walking school bus, and that is quite a bit what it sounds like, the idea of a bus route. Instead of it being a motor vehicle, it is a group walking together, parents, students, staff, all walking together, picking students up as we walk through the neighborhoods and arriving at school. And then we turn it around in the afternoon, we start at the school, and we walk home. On the enforcement side of the program, there's a little bit two sides. One is enforcement of school policy regarding parking, where we want vehicles parked, where we want students being dropped off, and what parent behaviors should be, what expectations we have for parents in and around the school. All of these focusing on the safety of the bicyclists and pedestrians arriving at school. On the law enforcement side, we can pay overtime for patrols through the program. We can have law enforcement officers involved in our education events. And a number of communities in Montana are starting an encouragement ticket. They've worked with local businesses to donate services or gift cards. Those are given to law enforcement officers who hand them out to students, parents, community members who are doing the right thing, driving the speed limit, yielding to pedestrians in crosswalks, students who are wearing bicycle helmets, and crossing appropriately at crosswalks. Evaluation, this is as an important E. We start at the beginning of the program with looking at evaluation. What are our barriers to our students walking and biking to school, and what are the local solutions? As the programming matures, we look to evaluate how we're doing. Have we made the community safer? Are we increasing the number of students walking? And have we changed attitudes about walking and biking to school? And the last one, engineering, and that is changing our built environment to make it more conducive to biking and walking and making it safer. Okay, I'd like to now jump in and talk about a few representative programs from across the state. We do have Safe Routes to School programs broadly spread across the state, small and large communities. Last year, we had 37 applications from across the state of Montana for a total funding request of almost $4 million. There is a great need for Safe Routes to School programs in the state of Montana. We have a lot of communities who are engaged and interested in this. We're looking for funding to help them get their program started to install the needed sidewalks and pathways and safe crossings for their students. And we're making progress. We're making good progress in a lot of communities, and we continue to move forward. Shelby started in the very beginning of the program. They have taken a nicely measured approach. They instituted in the beginning a Walking Wheeling Wednesdays program. They meet in several locations in the community, and groups of students and parents and staff. And the mayor often joins them in walking to school. You can see here the high school mascot. It's, again, a way to make it fun for students. It's a way for parents to spend more time with their kids, getting some exercise and being active. And in the center, we see highlighted a section of sidewalk that was installed with Safe Routes to School money that's along one of their walking routes. They prioritized installation of infrastructure along the routes that they are using for their Walking Wheeling Wednesdays program. In Ronan, they've had a successful program since the early stages of the Safe Routes to School program, and they too have combined it with encouragement events, a big Walk to School Day celebration this year. They had Monty there with them, walking with the students. They had 243 students, or 243 participants. They hold a pathway celebration every year in the spring to celebrate the pathway that runs from Polson to Ronan. They include the communities of Polson and Pablo. They work
to get people out to celebrate the pathway. They're working on instituting education programs in the schools, bike and pedestrian safety education programs. On the infrastructure side, they've worked tightly with the Transportation Enhancement Program in Montana, CTEP, as well as working being involved in the process of the design of the US 93 reconstruction in the routing of the pathway that's associated with that. That pathway will now diverge from the highway and run between the elementary, middle school, and high school and tie into their Safe Routes to School and CTEP pathways within the community. In Dillon, they've worked very hard on their non-infrastructure program. They have a very successful walking school bus program led by the University of Montana Western Campus Corps students. They have two active walking school bus routes that run to and from school 5 days a week, and they are working to add a third route. The students, both the elementary and middle school students, or the elementary students that have participated, and the University of Montana students are having a great time. They've developed friendships. They have nicknames for each other. And they organized a day when the University of Montana students and the students from the elementary school decorated the sidewalks with wonderful messages like "Somebody loves you," "Stop, look," things to encourage students as they walk to school. They've also undertaken a helmet program. They've worked to ensure that all of their elementary students have access to a bicycle helmet. And they have a walk and talk with the doc program where they get doctors from the local hospitals to participate in their walks and talk about health issues with the students. Bozeman has a long-running program. It's growing in success each year. The school district becomes more and more involved. They have developed school travel plans for each of their elementary and middle schools. They work with the city to implement those, to make changes in the infrastructure. They have tremendously successful Bike to School Day last spring. Hawthorne Elementary here in Bozeman had 140 people participate in their bike train on the way to school, and Sacagawea Middle School regularly fills their 300 spaces in their bicycle rack on Bike to School Day. Town of Ennis has developed a wonderful program. They have tied it into their existing local community events. They encourage people to come out and they promote their event on the 4th of July. They're developing a walk to school program. On the infrastructure side of the program, they are working on designating specific streets within their community as walking routes, putting down pavement markings and signs, identifying them as that. The center photograph you see is a bike education program that they have done with the local bike shop. And they are working to develop a remote drop-off location. And this is a great opportunity for rural community to involve those students who live too far away. They're looking to have at their community park, develop a location for buses and parents to drop students off remotely from the school, and then establish a walking school bus route from that location to the school. The idea being that we'll reduce the number of vehicles in and around the schools, making it safer for students that are already walking and biking, increasing air quality, and making it more convenient for the parents to not have to drive into the school zone. As I mentioned, we have Safe Routes to School programs in communities large and small all across the state. And I encourage anyone out there that isn't already involved in the program to make your town the next one. For those of you, or for programs that already exist, or as you're thinking about planning yours, encourage programs to start off with small and manageable steps, build the momentum for their program, and then start to think about how they expand. So take a few minutes and talk about ways to do that. A lot of programs, as I mentioned, participate in Walk to School Day. Maybe a next step for a community like that or a school is to add a monthly walk. Schools develop themes for each month. Students are encouraged to dress up. Again, we're trying to make it fun for the students, fun for the parents and staff that are involved, fun for the community. If you've already got a monthly walk, maybe you establish a weekly walk, a walking wheeling Wednesdays or a Fit Fridays like Shelby does. Start a walking school bus program, even if it's just one route to your elementary school one day a week. Then you can add another day or add another route. Include another school. The larger communities may start with, as we did in Bozeman, you start with one elementary school and you slowly grow it to the other ones, learning from the successes of the program before. Push further into winter. A lot of programs here in Montana will start to shut down their walking school bus programs, close their encouragement programs for the winter. And I understand that. We have harsh winters here in Montana. But I would encourage us to compete with states like New Hampshire that have programs that walk through the winter in a climate that's extremely similar to ours. And I think we as Montanans are hardy enough that we can encourage our students to walk most days in the winter. Start earlier in the spring. If you live in a place where it just is really unrealistic to walk through the winter, think about starting a little bit earlier. Or like I said, think about walking year-round. We can look to expand our Safe Routes to School group or our task force and committee. This often starts with a couple of champions in the school or within the community, and that's a great way to start. Think about who your other advocates in your community can be: law enforcement, city officials, public health officials, parents, church groups, senior citizen groups. These are all people that bring tremendous experience and support to the program and can really help your program to grow. Engage youth advocates, FFA, other high school groups. While we don't specifically target high schools through the Safe Routes to School program for the walking and biking, we certainly can engage high school students as advocates for the programs. They can participate in the walking school buses with us. They can be mentors for the younger students. Our youth have a tremendous amount to offer, and the elementary and middle school students can be involved in designing the program and in helping to model the encouragement programs and help us to understand what it is that will make it easier and make them feel safer as they walk to school. We can implement it or host bike and pedestrian safety events. Lots of communities do this already. Bike rodeos. We have a special day, where we celebrate biking and walking, and at the same time we teach bicycle and pedestrian safety skills. If you're already doing one, maybe we host another one in that year. The next step would be to bring a curriculum into the classrooms. We have a fabulous program here in Montana. Out of Florence, Montana, Roger DeBrito has developed over the last 25 years an elementary traffic education program that fits within the existing health enhancement curriculum. We're not asking the health enhancement teachers to add anything to their classroom. We know they have little enough time as it is, but these are resources that the health enhancement teachers can use to bring lessons on pedestrian and bicycle safety into their classroom that fit right into what they're already doing. For the middle school students, I have a couple of Hellgate School in Missoula that has started a bicycle club, particularly targeted at middle school students. Again, expanding their knowledge, their competency in riding, and getting them excited and engaged. We can look at involving Safe Routes to Schools and active activities into the fundraising that we're already doing in our schools. Many PTAs and PACs are involved in fundraising programs that often involve selling wonderfully delicious treats that are not always healthy. Let's think about turning this around and making these fundraising activities based on healthy, active living activities, fun runs, walkathons. Program that the National Partnership for Safe Routes to School is piloting in several states called Fire Up Your Feet is essentially a canned program that involves fundraising, promotion, and advertising. It's something that we can bring. It's ready to go. It's print-ready materials, et cetera, that you can bring into your community to help with the program. Mileage clubs, if they don't exist, we can start one. Again, I talked a little bit about it, the idea that students rack mileage as they walk or bike, either at school or on their way to school. If your mileage club already exists at school, which it does in many places, add the opportunity to get miles as you walk to and from school. An important piece that I think comes hand in hand with the program as it develops, but we can really expand, is the promotion of our program. Get the advertising out there. Really promote it within our community, why we're doing this, how successful we're being, the number of students that are involved, how many miles we're walking, the carbon offset that we're doing, calories burned. All of these sorts of things are things that we can calculate and we can use to promote the program, we can use to raise community awareness. And then the remote drop-off that I mentioned that Ennis is working on, the idea of developing a location in your community where we can think about the buses and the parents that are driving from outside of our community, driving their students. They can drop them off there. Students can get that necessary physical activity before entering the classroom, that activity that's documented to improve academic performance, improve behavioral performance in the classrooms. We can add that to the day of a student who needs to ride in a vehicle a certain portion of their trip to school. My last one, and this is, like I said, when you've established your Safe Routes to School group, it often involves health officials, parents, school officials, city or county officials, law enforcement. We've developed a broad group that has a lot of knowledge about the community and a lot of investment in the community. You can start to think about supporting policy changes that support Safe Routes to School activities. School siting. Thinking about if we're building a new school in our community, we're thinking about consolidation. What impacts do the decisions that we make about where we site our school have, not just on the students and their ability to walk or bike to school, but on the transportation costs of the district, of the families involved, the environmental considerations of adding additional driving, of developing greenfield sites rather than using existing sites. These are all, and value of neighborhoods and home values. If we move schools to the outskirts of town, we move them away from the core of our downtown, that can drastically affect home values in our communities, and whether people are going to remain in the community or whether people want to move to our community. Distracted driving, this is one that's coming heavily on the national radar. Communities across Montana are passing cell phone ordinances. There's a study out of the University of Utah in 2006 documenting that motorists using handheld and hands-free devices while driving are as impaired as drunk drivers. This is a major concern for all of us and our safety on the roads, but particularly vulnerable road users such as students walking and biking to school. And then I encourage Safe Routes to School groups to think about how they can be involved in local or state funding decisions. Many times the decisions that impact us the most are the ones that are made in our community. How are we spending our transportation dollars in our community? How are we spending our maintenance funds? What about school district funds? We know these are all limited funding costs. We need to make sure that we're spending them in the ways that benefit our communities and the health and safety of our students the most. So again, I ask, why not trade this for this? Funding applications for Safe Routes to School are due December 31st. It is not too late if you're interested in applying for Safe Routes to School funding. If you want to start a non-infrastructure program, you want to get some education going, please contact me. It's definitely not too late to think about an application for this year. And there are lots of things that we can do to get the program going and get things going in your community without any funding. There's a few websites here, local. The first two are local relative to Montana. The second two are national resources on Safe Routes to School. Encourage you to explore those. There are lots of ideas and resources for communities that are starting or expanding a Safe Routes program. And my final slide is my contact information. As I mentioned, please be in touch with me if you're interested. Either in starting a program or how you can expand a program that's existing or become involved in a program that's existing in your community. This student here, I think, has a great message for all of us. turn the discussion over to Cathy Costakis, and she's going to talk specifically about one of the really important policy changes that we can make, and that's the idea of a complete streets policy.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here to talk about such an important subject and such an important program, and one that, you know, we didn't even think about when I was a kid, and I think maybe some of you that might be a little bit older would agree that we just walked and biked. I grew up in Chicago, and I never thought about having my parents drive me to school, and we have pretty good winters in Chicago. So it's kind of interesting how things have changed over the years. But they have, and therefore we need these very important programs. So I just want to talk about really local government involvement in making our community safer to walk and bicycle and even take transit. One of the things that I talk about, and Taylor and I drive around the state quite a bit together and talk about these issues, is that you know, we can try to get convert our communities one project at a time, one safe routes to school project at a time, or we also need to, though, make the right policies at the local level so that this just happens, you know, as a matter of course. We just make our community safer and healthier for our residents on a regular basis. And so that entails these local policies and actually statewide policies as well. So what I want to start with is this idea that local government is charged with protecting the public health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. And so I would encourage you, first of all, to seek out your public health departments and see if they can contribute and be part of your coalition. But public health is more than just about sewer and septic and restaurant inspections and immunizations, things like that. We're now dying of chronic disease. About 2/3 of Montanans are at an unhealthy weight. At least 40% of our 7th and 8th graders don't get the minimum daily recommended activity, and that could be gotten walking and biking to school, at least partially. We know that rural areas have higher mortality and disability rates and chronic disease rates than urban areas. It used to be different. You know, we used to be much more active, working the land, doing all these kinds of things, but now sometimes due to the fact that our infrastructure is such that it's not as safe in rural areas to walk and bike, because maybe it's the highway that runs through the community and that's the only place to walk. So speaking of safety, I'll move through these quickly because we're a little bit tight on time. But the last bullet here says, you know, motor vehicle collisions are the leading cause of death for children ages 3 to 14, and almost 20% of these fatalities are children that are pedestrians. So safety, that public health safety, is a part of this, and that really has a lot to do with rural communities. And then the welfare of our citizens, you know, quality of life, access to quality education, access to health care, access to jobs. People need to have a choice of how they get to these places, and streets are public spaces, and they contribute or they detract from our communities in terms of health and safety and welfare. So we need to use the best, you know, make the best of our public dollars to make sure that they really enhance our communities. So complete streets is a concept that happened several years ago, and really it's a very simple concept. It's just that when the road is designed and thought of and envisioned, we always think of all users. You know, people that will be walking, people that are bicycling, people that drive, people that take transit, and then people of all ages and abilities. We call them sometimes 8 to 80 streets. You know, an 8-year-old should be comfortable as well as an 80-year-old. Why is this important? It's surprising to some people, but nearly 1/3 of Montanans don't actually drive. So we have a highly aging state, and many of those seniors have given up their right to drive, and we're all going to get there. So we all probably want to make our communities such that we can age and still get around in our communities. All of our children under 16, people with mobility impairments, about 20% of Montanans have a mobility impairment or disability of some sort. which may impair their ability to drive. And then there are people that, out of necessity, either through low income or even choice, decide that they don't want to drive a vehicle, and so they need to take other modes of transportation. And it's not just about the street. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but if we make the street right, but we put things in the wrong place, like Taylor said, putting their school in the wrong place, that makes it really hard for people to get there either through distance or across a major arterial or something like that. We need to make sure that our land use decisions are made, made correctly and smartly, and that residential areas are near places where people need to work, people need to go to school, grocery stores, important destinations. And we need to have our community be more connected. So we need to think about how people are going to get there and make sure that they can actually get there the total distance safely. And that usually implies a grid system of some sort with our streets, and that we have shorter block lengths, or that we actually do some mid-block crossings, because we know people will cross the street, and if we don't have a safe place for them to do that, then they may be crossing unsafely. Access management is really about these arterial streets that we have that have a lot of what I call like strip development corridors, where there's a lot of driveways that come in and out of the street. Access management is needed so that we don't have all these driveways coming into the street, crossing our sidewalks, if we even have them on those streets, and creating a really unsafe condition. And then site design. We need to make the places better and more pleasurable for people to actually walk and bike. So including street trees and including buildings that are coming up to the street with windows that are interesting to pedestrians, instead of these parking lots that come up to the street and are not places that are safe or pleasurable for people to walk or bike. So I'm just having a few slides here. What is missing? Obviously the sidewalk, maybe some trees. The street is actually much wider than it needs to be. So, can we make our local streets more safe and pleasurable? And our arterial streets, where are we accommodating here for pedestrians or bicyclists? And can we make it safer? And here, there's evidence that people are, walking and biking along this corridor. We just need to be thinking about them and envisioning them as users of this transportation system when we build the street, but also when we retrofit the street. And then these policies in place would probably, a complete streets policy would say, what is the process for, working with all jurisdictions? So this sign in Uptown Butte would probably not have been put in the middle of the sidewalk if people were thinking about, pedestrians and bicyclists and what their needs are, especially in the downtown area. And on the right, if we don't have good subdivision ordinances that actually require some sidewalks to be put in, even if we're in a rural community, we're talking 50 years from now. Is it gonna be something that we would have wanted to have as a sidewalk? And our forefathers thought about it. Some of our places really have some good sidewalks and some mature street trees. So we're benefiting from that now. Can we have some good policies going into the future? And crosswalks are another part of complete streets. So we need to get across the street as well as down the corridor. So here on the left, we see a really great striping of a crosswalk, but then it goes to a place where there's no sidewalk, there's no curb cut. So really thinking about the entire connectivity of the system. And here on the right, there's no evidence that a pedestrian really should be crossing here, and it makes it unsafe. And then I think about older people and their needs and their ability to walk fast enough to get across the street, even at a signal. So I always say it's good that this woman has her tennis shoes on, because she's going to need them to get across the street in time for the light to change. But we do know how to build things right. Here's a mid-block crossing at a school area. It's designed so that when the kids get to the middle, they only have to really cross one side of the street at a time, and then when they get to the middle middle of the street, they can actually, they're actually oriented more towards to look at the car coming at them. So, and then they can do their final crossing. And then also there's lots of reasons for bike lanes in a community. This is Twin Bridges. There's a a highway going through their main street, and one of the things that this does is help narrow the street, because we know wider streets and streets without a lot of trees make it seem more comfortable for cars to drive fast. And so one of the things that bike lanes will do is narrow the street and make cars, it actually is a little bit of a traffic calming device, as well as a safe place for bicyclists to be. So there's lots of reasons to do some of these things that will complete our streets. And when we don't have the actual right-of-way, we don't have enough room in the street to actually add the bike lane, we can put something called a share-o, which is a shared lane use marking, which just tells the motorists that there is a reason, there will be bicyclists on the street, and they have a right to be there. Now, in Montana, we do have places that are far distances from each other, and so public transportation is a very important part of completing our street and our transportation system. So we need these things to connect. So there's a bicycle on this great bus system that we have in Bozeman. There's also a great bus system in north central Montana, and it really helps to get people that really don't have the ability to drive a car or don't want to safely get to where they need to get. And then when they become pedestrians or bicyclists after that, and we need to make the environment safe when they get off the bus. So complete streets policy, I won't go through this, but I really want people to contact me if you have an interest in working on a complete streets policy in your community. It's really about a vision for your community that works for all users. And I just want to say that it doesn't mean that every street has a sidewalk, curb, gutter, sidewalk, bike lane. It just means that it works for the context. So if you have a rural road, but it's 70 miles an hour and it goes, there's some people that live on that rural road, we want a wide shoulder so that people at least have some place to be. And maybe there's not a lot of people, but if there are people, they need to have a safe place to be, or a bicyclist. And sometimes when we're talking about bicyclists, these are tourists that come to Montana. And if we had a great system of rural roads that bicyclists could be on, that would really be a great boon economically to the state, I really believe, because this is a very up and coming and has been for a while way of people spending their vacations. So really, we want to make sure that it is context sensitive, and if we don't have the right of way, there are exceptions. It's something that you write into the policy and say, if we absolutely can't do it, there's some high level management approval that is required, but we don't have to do it everywhere. And maintenance is one of those things. It's not saying that you can't chip seal your road and maintain your road. It just says that there may be an opportunity to restripe a road when you maintain it. So let's look for those opportunities. So it's really about not about just street standards. It's really about changing the process and really envisioning your community to work for all the participants that use the roadway. It's a national movement. There are 27 states that have passed complete streets policies at a statewide level. 270 local jurisdictions have adopted complete streets policies. In Montana, we have 4 communities, Missoula, Bozeman, Helena, and Billings, that have passed policies, and several others are working on it now. So we're really trying to have people understand what complete streets mean and what it doesn't mean. There's some misconceptions about complete streets, that it's just so onerous and that we can't do anything to the street unless we make it a complete street. Those are not true. We are context sensitive, and it really depends on the community as to what a complete streets policy means to you. So you can write your own policy. There are lots of resources for communities that are looking to work on a complete streets policy. The National Complete Streets Coalition has a great website that has policy language. It has stories. It has a blog site. The National Policy and Legal Analysis Network has actual policy language. There's a lot of information on that website. And the American Public Health Association has really gotten into this conversation of how health and transportation are connected. So you could just Google some of these names and these things will come up. So I just really see this as a great extension of the Safe Routes program, because I don't believe that there's really enough money and to actually do all the infrastructure projects that we need to do in the state. And I really believe that we need to be really cognizant of how we're building our communities and how we're retrofitting our roads, to really think about all the users whenever we do that. So here's my information. I'd love to hear from any of you who are interested in working with your local governments. I always say just take a planner to lunch and start talking to them about these issues. They usually would like to hear from citizens. And if you have these Safe Routes to School coalitions, they're a perfect partnership to come together and work on these kinds of policy issues. So I'm sorry we took a little bit longer, but we'd love to entertain some questions, I think, at this point. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thanks, Cathy and Taylor. That was certainly very interesting, and I know applies to a lot of communities in Montana. Just a reminder to the audience, if you have a question, please press *6 to unmute your line. Again, that's *6. Or you can type your questions into the chat box, which is at the right-hand side of your screen.